it's very fulfilling, I think, to meet
Sure.
people and listen to their stories and just I don't just sit there and not judge them, I guess, because that's not something a
Sure.
lot of these people are used to. And I know that from personal experience, just being able to sit there and tell your story in an environment and to someone, another human being, because we're social animals, right? Being
Right.
able to tell that to another human being who isn't going to laugh at you, isn't going to look at you like you just grew a second head, but is just going
Uh-huh.
to sit there and just kind of nod and be like, yeah, okay, sure. Why not?
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Writers Drinking Whiskey, your literary happy hour, the show where the only thing impossible is having a bad time, and all the high strangeness usually comes from your host, William R. Hincy. Today, I am really honored and thrilled to have author, Mothman researcher extraordinaire in general, Tobias Wayland with me. Tobias, welcome to the bar.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I am super stoked about this. We went to the Sasquatch Festival in Boise, Idaho, probably about 2 years ago now, and I had a chance to meet Dr. Jeff Meldrum, and I was, talked to him for a minute, like in the line, and I was like, would you be willing to come on my crazy kind of writer show? And he was like, yeah, I'd love to. That sounds like fun. And so my wife knew I was super into Mothman, and she's like, if you really like those, you should do more of those shows. You enjoy it, like you're super interested. And I was like, you are right. I have this show for a reason. Let's talk to all the fun people here. So let me give you, I like to keep everything very theme oriented. So instead of giving you the Cliff Notes version of a bio, I want to give you the tasty notes version of a bio, and feel free to add anything I might have missed. But the author, I think it was 3 books I found on the website, although authors are notorious for them not being updated, myself included. But you had the Yuletide Guide to High Strangeness, Strange Tales of the Impossible, and the Lake Michigan Mothman, High Strangeness in the Midwest. You're a MUFON field investigator, and then also you're the head writer editor for the singular, I always want to say it wrong, 14 Society? Is that how you say it?
40 usually, but
40,
like
okay.
you're not far off. Like you shouldn't feel bad. It's fine.
Right. Well, it's one of those things once you mispronounce a word one time, and it's just always, even when you say it right, you think you have it wrong because of that. I think that's
Right,
where I
right.
fall. So, anything you want to add to that? Anything I missed?
No, I think that was very succinct. The only thing as far as books are concerned, I have one coming out relatively soon, and that'll be out in September. That's just called Mothman. It's from Llewellyn. I wrote it with my friend Richard Estep, who would be a great guest, by the way. If you've
Oh,
never
very
if you've
cool.
never talked to Richard, he's written about 1 million books. I literally would not be able to keep track of them all. But yeah, he and I wrote a Mothman book together, so that'll
Oh,
be
I would
exciting.
love to. Yeah, I would love to talk to him. We'll follow up after the show. But like I was telling you kind of pregame here, the show is mostly actually, in fact, for fiction writers, I don't reach out to people anymore because everyone's this kind of 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon down. So I'm hoping now with
Sure.
getting into more of I never know the term. I know some people get particular, but like for kind of a normie like me, kind of the paranormal stuff, all of that. So that'd be cool. Yeah, I'll definitely we'll talk after, and I'd
Awesome.
love to make that work. And I like to start here is to kind of get to know where you are in the world and what's the best place to get a drink there.
Oh, wow. Well, I live in a tiny village of about 1,400 people in south central Wisconsin. It's the name of the village for anybody who might happen to know is Orfordville. And if you were gonna get a drink, I mean, you're pretty much I can't say it's your only option, but by far your best option has to be Newt, which is as far as I know, I don't go out a ton, but as far
Uh-huh.
as I know, it's like the best full bar. It's like one of those Wisconsin, kind of small town local bars. Like everybody's real
Uh-huh.
nice, and if you go in at certain times, it feels like you're walking into a stranger's house, like that kind of feeling.
Uh-huh.
But it's a very relaxed sort of environment, and they have a great Friday fish fry, which is a big deal if you live in Wisconsin. So
Uh-huh. Sure,
can't go
sure.
wrong.
How far is that? I until about a year ago, I worked for a company stationed in Neenah, Wisconsin. As is that I never know how Wisconsin goes. I'd usually fly into, sometimes I'd fly into Chicago, frankly, and just do a 3 hour
Okay.
drive over. But it's by Appleton is, I guess, the airport. And
That would be, it's not super close to, like to
okay.
us. We're probably closer to Chicago because
Oh, okay.
we live like 20 minutes north of the border to Illinois. So,
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Yes. Chicago to Neenah. I did the drive a few times and it was about, I think, 3 hours. I see.
okay.
I'm in LA. So if it's 3 hours moving, it's nothing to me. That's like a half-hour drive here. I'm like, everything's like you
Sure.
take the minutes and the hours. It's a half hour to get there or it's 3 hours to get there. Like you don't know depending on the moment. So very cool. Thank you for that. So I like to kind of get us started here with just kind of your author's journey. Just, kind of what got you started, writing, you could talk researching, anything you want.
Sure.
However you want to take us from there.
Yeah. So, I've always had a, a deep interest in reading and writing, expressing myself through writing. But since a very, very young age, I guess just sort of a natural inclination towards that. Now, for weird things specifically, like the subject matter that I find myself writing about, I was drawn to that by a ongoing series of just strange experiences, starting when I was really young. And honestly, I like to tell people that if it wasn't for that, if I wouldn't have experienced strange, seemingly paranormal events for myself, I would probably think that this is pretty silly. Honestly, I don't know how
Sure.
seriously I would take it. Like, really,
Yeah, sure, I get it.
I've always been interested in like fantasy and horror and science fiction. But the paranormal specifically, I was drawn to because of those events. And so, to date myself somewhat, when I was young and I wanted to try to learn more about these weird things, I would have to go down to the library. There was no
Sure.
internet, and
Yeah.
so riding my bike to the library was the only option. And luckily at the time we lived in Sun Prairie, Wisconsin, which had a pretty nice library actually, and still does. And so I would go down there and they had a great like occult section and a great like speculative nonfiction section. And I found a bunch of books in there by people like John Keel and Brad Steiger, Whitley Strieber, Rosemary Ellen Guiley, all of these different authors who had written about people who had experienced things similar to what I was experiencing. And so there was a sense of relief, I guess, that I found through discovering them. And as an adult, then when it came time to kind of decide how I wanted to approach my own writing professionally, it occurred to me that maybe one of the more fulfilling ways I would be able to do that would be by providing for other people the same thing that those writers, those investigators, those researchers had done for me. And so, I got into like paranormal investigation and interviewing people and then writing about their experiences and wanting very much to portray their experiences authentically to how the witness experienced them, right? So it
Hmm.
wasn't necessarily, of course, you always want to be able to follow up on certain facts and things and get your story straight. But the most important thing for me was the authentic replication of that experience, because at the end of the day, that's all we have, right?
Sure.
Is this sort of experiential data that come from the people who lived through it. And it was important to me, and still is, of course, that these people be able to tell their stories in, again, a way that is authentic to their experience, because that helps them get the kind of cathartic release, I think, that I was missing for so much of my life. Because despite finding these authors, I still couldn't talk about this stuff, right? Like I didn't
Sure.
have anybody I
Right.
could talk to about it. And so being able to finally provide that to people has been great.
It's pretty much exactly what I wanted, and it's a real pleasure to be able to do that for folks. I meet a lot of people at conferences and things now, and it's it's very fulfilling, I think, to meet
Sure.
people and listen to their stories and just I don't just sit there and not judge them, I guess, because that's not something a
Sure.
lot of these people are used to. And I know that from personal experience, just being able to sit there and tell your story in an environment and to someone, another human being, because we're social animals, right? Being
Right.
able to tell that to another human being who isn't going to laugh at you, isn't going to look at you like you just grew a second head, but is just going
Uh-huh.
to sit there and just kind of nod and be like, yeah, okay, sure, why not?
Right.
Um, I
Right. Yeah.
I think that's great. So.
Yeah, no, I think that's wonderful. I think it's a great point because I remember that too. Growing up, it was kind of Unsolved Mysteries was the TV show that would actually cover ghost or a Bigfoot or UFOs. Right there wasn't much before that I could remember, or it was going to the library and I remember getting Loch Ness monster books or UFO encounter books. But if you had the experiences, yeah, you never had a chance for someone because even with an interest in it, I've had two maybe kind of things I've seen that weren't too. I grew up in Palmdale, which is where Edwards Air Force Base is, and they do a lot of the testing. So when the B-2 bomber was revealed, that's like 2 miles from my house. In fact, my dad later worked at that. He was an aerospace engineer. He later worked at Northrop
Oh,
Grumman
wow.
right there. And so there's lots of UFO reports there because they are testing lots of black ops stuff. And sure the B-2 was tons of UFO reports, people going, oh, what is this thing? And then it gets revealed. So I think I saw something like that once, although it was kind of weird. And then one time a little just kind of an orb kind of thing in the mountains. But minor stuff, not anything that that's why I'm giving you the tasty notes even version of those stories because I don't think they're that like wildly interesting. But even just the interest in it, I get the weird look. Like, really, you think there's a Sasquatch? Really, you like Mothman? Like that? Yeah, that's silliness. And so I can only imagine because when you hear the experience, like one of my favorite podcasts is the Sasquatch Chronicles, and it's
Okay.
partially my favorite just because he lets them tell their stories. Just kind of lets them go and ask a question here or there. And you can hear in some of the people the real fear, the different things they go through, and that catharsis, like you mentioned, was absolutely getting a chance just to someone to listen to you. It's therapeutic, right? In that way, just like if you go to a therapist, sometimes you do just need someone to listen without judgment and without having skin in the game. If I go talk to my wife about being upset with my wife, that might be an important thing for us to have the conversation. It may not, but that may not be the therapy for me, right? I'm also kind of burdening her. So having that third person there that you're not burdening with the information can be
Right.
can be good. So, do you care to share any of the experiences that you had, or?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's no problem. I've been pretty open about them in the past. The one thing that I never wanted to do when I started out was to make it about me, right? Like for me, it was
Sure.
always about these witnesses because you get into the paranormal field and I don't have to tell you, I'm sure, but there are some real personalities here and they love to make
Sure.
things about themselves. And there's just sort of, I don't know, narcissism or inauthenticity to that just was not attractive to me because of course if you're telling your own story, you're promoting your own story, then you have a vested interest in that particular story, often a financial interest. And I think then that there are some red flags. It just sort of makes it less credible. But also, I'm just kind of an introverted person anyway, and I don't always share my business with people.
Sure.
So like there's that that element of it too. But yeah, I definitely don't mind talking about it. I've found over the years that people, well, especially experiencers, when they find out that you've experienced something too, then that itself can be pretty comforting. So yeah, I mean, from a very, very young age, and I mean like 2, 3, 4 years old, like that age where you don't even have like full memory. you've got like fragments of
Right.
memories, like just images, right? I remember being terrified of going to bed because I knew when I did that something was going to happen, something was going to come for me, right?
Uh-huh.
And so going all the way back then, like if we just start with those fragments, it would be like waking up feeling like something is digging painfully in my ribs or like hands trying to get underneath me to pick me up, sleeping with the covers over my head, like that tried and true method of self-defense against all monsters that
Right.
doesn't work even a little. I would do
Right.
that. And I remember seeing like what looked like hands, like human hands, basically pressing in from the outside of that blanket. And honestly, if that's all it ever was, then that could have been written off as like childhood imagination, dreams, who knows, right? But as life went on, I continued to have experiences. I would see, I guess, what would best be described as like shadow people, and that could be any time, nighttime, daytime, whatever. And the nighttime visitations continued. I remember into my teen years, waking up to see what, for lack of a better description, would just look like traditional gray aliens leaning over my bed.
Uh-huh.
Which again, if that's all it ever was, then you could say, well, maybe that was like some sort of hypnopompic hallucination or something. But I remember one particularly impactful experience. I was in my early 20s when this happened. And I remember waking up one night. I was living at Holmes. This is the suburbs of Sun Prairie, Wisconsin. And I had gone to bed normally, that nothing was out of the ordinary. And I woke up very suddenly, and I could see in the ambient light of the suburbs through my window that everything was in my room. And well, first of all, I was in my room, and then I looked around and I could see everything was kind of where it was supposed to be, but my perception was skewed, right? And it took me a second to figure out why exactly that was. But when I realized what was happening, it seemed like I was floating 2 or 3 feet above my bed. Now, I wasn't paralyzed. I could move. I decided sort of in that moment it might not be the best idea to move a lot because I
Sure.
didn't really
Right.
know what was going on.
Uh-huh.
And so I really only moved my head. I remember I turned my head to the left, because the to my right was the wall, and I turned my head, and when I do, I see this figure, and it looked like just this solid black silhouette of a human. I mean, based on the silhouette, I would say male, but I mean, who knows, right?
Uh-huh.
And I look at this thing, and I get the distinct feeling that like I'm not supposed to be awake for any of this. Like this is a mistake. Like none of this was
Right.
planned. And so this thing, whatever it is, it reaches its hand out and it puts its hand on my chest. And in the moment, I interpreted that as like being comforting. I don't really know what this thing's motivation was, but it
Yeah,
seemed
sure.
comforting. Like you would put your
Uh-huh.
hand on somebody to try to comfort them. And when that happened, I was lowered back down to my bed, and then it just vanished. And I find myself laying there on top of my covers, which was unusual because I didn't really like to be on top of my covers a lot. I still don't. And I just thought about it for a minute, and I was like, did that really happen? I mean, I was fully awake, right? Like if I
Right.
was asleep for that, I might be asleep for this conversation. Like that's how it felt.
Sure. Right.
And and so at that point, and people always ask, like, well, weren't you scared? Why didn't you go wake people up? I'd be screaming. And it's like, well, first of all, at that point, I had decided if whatever this was, whatever I had seen or encountered or had been experiencing throughout my life was going to hurt me, it would have hurt me way before then. Like I
Uh-huh.
wasn't
Sure.
harmed. And I had also learned at a very young age that it was pointless to go wake up my parents. Like that never ended well. And it really wasn't,
Right.
it's true. And it wasn't until I started writing about this professionally that I think they really started to take it seriously. So like now you talk to them, they're like, "Oh yeah, no, of course. Like we always believed you." And I'm like, "Did you though? Did you really?"
Right, right. Well, it's
So,
like every time you hear a ghost story, me and my wife laugh when we'll listen to them on, podcast or whatever. It's like the families never talk to each other. So they'd be like, I was
right.
witnessing this, I was witnessing this. And the parents are witnessing things and they're like, no one ever talks to each other. Or the parents always deny it. And then later on they talk. So I believe that. I believe that completely. So it's funny because it is really natural, right? I remember, not anything supernatural, but Palmdale still is. And when I was growing up, fairly rough and tumble. There's a few times I'm walking. It's dirt town. It's in Mojave Desert, and it's dirt on the instead of sidewalks. I'm walking, and there's like twice like cars literally veered off the road to try to hit me, like veered full speed into the dirt. Yeah. Luckily, I was a quick kid. I was able to get out of the way. And I never once thought about telling my parents what happened. I'm like on my way
Right.
home. I'm getting home. They're probably making dinner. I'm probably sitting down and having tuna noodle casserole, with them. Never, oh, I should tell them about this. So, because, there's probably that things like one, like if you wake them up, they're gonna like be upset you're waking them up. Are they gonna
Yep.
even believe you? Like, do you even completely believe yourself? Because it's such a strange thing. So, yeah,
Yeah.
I can.
It's all of that.
Do you ever lucid dream? Have you ever had any lucid dreams or like sleep paralysis, anything like that?
Sleep paralysis, no. Lucid dream, not anything that I've ever done myself. I guess, I mean, maybe to a limited degree. I say this because I'm not any kind of lucid dreaming expert, but I've
Oh,
certainly
sure, yeah.
been in that position, I think, when I was asleep and dreaming, and you sort of realize, well, okay, like what if I could fly right now? And then like you are
Uh-huh.
flying.
Right.
But it was never anything that was so intentional. And that's
Uh-huh.
something I've thought a lot about, honestly, especially sleep paralysis. Sleep paralysis is sort of the swamp gas or weather balloon of a lot
Yeah,
of
right.
haunting or like
Uh-huh.
alien
Right.
experience or kind of explanations where I will tell people, I'm like, look, I don't think it was sleep paralysis. And I'll tell somebody, like a friend, and they'll be like, have you considered sleep paralysis? And I'm like, dude, I just said,
Right, right.
because there are hallmarks to sleep
Right.
paralysis, right? Like it's a
Uh-huh.
fairly well understood phenomenon. And so when I ask myself honestly, it doesn't make a lot of sense. I mean, using that experience that I just shared as an example, first and foremost, like I wasn't paralyzed, but beyond that, the hallucinations that accompany the waking and falling asleep states, like those are distinct altered states, and we understand that. But the hallucinations, like they don't last very long, right? Like the only
Right.
reason that they would ever last for any period of time during sleep paralysis is because your body gets sort of locked in that half dreaming state. But that clearly wasn't happening to me because I could move and I
Right.
felt very lucid. I felt very awake in that moment. And so that lasted way longer than any normal hallucination. Like maybe I have been suffering from this heretofore undiscovered hallucinogenic phenomenon, or and maybe I should be studied. I have no idea. Like that's
Yeah,
cool
maybe.
too,
Yeah,
I
no.
guess.
Right, right. Well,
So, but yeah,
the only reason I ask is because I've
yeah,
for lucid dreaming, just like you, I know some people there's like techniques you can kind of make yourself and they'll do it, but I've had a number of times, a half dozen, maybe a dozen, not constant, but enough that like I recognize it when it happens to where I realized I was dreaming. But it's really clear you're dreaming. You know what I mean? When you have that happen,
right,
even like like you said, you're like, oh, what if I could fly, right? You kind of realize you can kind of do these things and control what happens around you. You're dreaming. And then I used to have sleep paralysis. I was a single dad when I was in my early 20s and really burning the candle on both ends, like going to work, and I would take naps at my lunch break. And I think I was so underslept. A lot of times I'd wake up but B, that paralysis point. And I'd always park under a tree because we're in California, it's hot, right? So I'd get under a tree so I have some shade. And I could, the hag, they would say sometimes, like, it would look like a witch, but it fades. I mean, in a matter of seconds, I think. It was never very long. And at some point, I recognized that's what it was. So even if I did wake up and that happened, I was already conscious of what oh, that's the tree. The first time or two, maybe it was a little like, what's happening? And then maybe 5 seconds. I mean, it wasn't anything that, you would really think is like, you know what I mean? I don't think you would actually stick with that as that was a real phenomenon or, you know what I mean?
Right,
Like,
right. Oh, sure.
yeah. But I think you had started to say something. I might have cut you off there. Was there something else you wanted to add to that?
Oh no, if there was, I don't remember. Oh wait, no, the one thing. Okay, no, I did think of something. The other part of that like lucid dreaming state, and I think you honestly just covered it when you're talking about sleep paralysis, is every time I've ever been in a dream and been like, oh, let's see if I can pick this up with telekinesis or something. That's all.
Uh-huh.
Those are always my absolute favorite, by the way, is the ones where I have telekinesis because that would just be the most convenient power of all time, and I wish I had it so
Sure.
bad.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like as soon as I do that, I'll be like, oh man, this better not be a dream, and then that's when you wake up, like
Uh-huh.
every
Right.
time.
Right.
So.
Yeah. That would be a really cool like superpower, especially like, wife would be like, take the trash out and just like, okay, honey, and just telekinesis the trash, not
Really?
watching the game or anything.
Yeah,
That's
like
the
you just
dream.
sat down and your book is like all the way across the room and you're like, oh man.
I do that like 6 times. I'll sit down, I mean to grab my laptop, you forget the laptop, and then you forget the TV controller, and you're just doing squats, but 10 sets of squats suddenly without having intended to. If you're watching Riders Drinking Whiskey, you are taking part in the meaning economy. And I mean that sincerely, even if my voice kind of has an ironic tone. This show is all about uninhibited, authentic conversations. And the quest we are on together is finding the authors and the works that are going to add meaning to the world and stand the test of time. And to that end, I will be releasing my most ambitious novel yet, Pirates of Appalachia, as a weekly serial on Substack. Pirates has everything you're looking for in a novel. It has adventure, it has pirates, it has hostile corporate takeovers, prophecy, love, longing for belonging, heroes, villains, psychedelic shenanigans of the highest order. Think 1984 with the Funny Bone. Kurt Vonnegut, if you found him drooling in an alley after a 3-night bender. Twain, if you replace that badass mustache with an eye patch and negligee. And rest assured, no sensitivity readers were injured in the making of Pirates of Appalachia. So please check out Substack. It's meeting the market needs by connecting readers directly with today's very best storytellers. We're just skipping the corporate kind of media apparatus and the endless scrolls on Amazon or Instagram or whatever else. You can get directly to creators on there, get a taste for their work, and then follow along the people that you love. And now let's get back to your regularly scheduled programming. I did want to transition over and talk some Mothman as my I don't know. And actually, I think I talked with Joshua. We talked beforehand. I'll say it here, and I'll link up his video. Future me, link the video here. Joshua Cutchin, who you happen to know, well, that and I happen to have spoke with just yesterday. And I think we had talked a little about like it's kind of weird calling Mothman a cryptid because it seems Bigfoot has weird stuff too, but a lot of times Bigfoot seems like it could be ape or a hominid, whatever you want to say, kind of roaming the forest. And at times it seems to operate like a very kind of real creature. There is lots of high strangeness that people don't, I think, like to talk about, maybe sweep under the rug. But Mothman seems very like the idea of saying Mothman is just an undiscovered man with wings. You know what I mean? Like that seems a little weird. It seems like there's something more high strange with the phenomenon with
Yes.
it. But I wonder if you could maybe start us with where you jumped into. I know the first book was Mothman in the Midwest. or was
Yes.
it Lake Michigan or something? I
The
had that.
well, the Lake Michigan Mothman
Yeah.
is what I ended up titling it, but that was just because at that time the sightings were coming in from like a certain mile radius around Lake Michigan. It's not actually connected to Lake Michigan, other than just sort of a general proximity to that area. I mean, Lake Michigan is the largest like geographic feature in this
Sure.
region, so
Uh-huh.
made a certain amount of sense. And there's just like a little bit of alliteration, which is always nice. Um, but
The writer in you
yeah,
coming out, like
right, of course,
you're on writers drinking whiskey, so I get you completely here.
yeah.
So, yeah.
But my introduction to that, now, of course, as a kid, as I mentioned, I had read John Keel. I actually didn't start with the Mothman prophecies when I was reading Keel. I started with like his Guide to Mysterious Creatures, which I thought was great, and moved on from there. But I of course I had read Mothman prophecies. I was sort of generally aware of the Point Pleasant sightings, but it's not something that I really thought a lot about. Really, my main interest was in UFOs. Like I investigate
Uh-huh.
everything. I've investigated ghosts and hauntings and cryptids and everything else, but I was more of a UFO guy traditionally. And it wasn't until the spring of 2017 when I saw a trio of winged creature sightings come out of MUFON. So like they had been reported. I wasn't with MUFON at that time, but I had seen that these three cases had come through their case management system, and MUFON had written a short article about it. At that time, I was writing news articles for weird stories for our website, and I picked it up and I was like, oh, yeah, this is interesting. Okay, sure, like Mothman sightings in Chicago. All right,
Uh-huh.
and so I wrote a short article for it, and I thought that would just be it. I thought it'd be one of those weird things that just happened once and then you forgot about it in a week.
Hmm.
But instead, there were dozens and dozens of these reports that they just kept coming, and they stopped coming through MUFON, and they started coming through. There were two websites in particular: UFO Clearinghouse and Phantoms and Monsters. And so I kind of wanted to do my journalistic due diligence, and I reached out to the proprietors of those websites and interviewed them separately and continued to cover their cases as they came in and were published. And not too long after that, I started getting people reaching out to me directly because they had some kind of weird sighting, and so they wanted to share it. And it just made a certain amount of sense, especially given my relative proximity to Chicago and Northern Illinois, to just start to work together and
Sure.
investigate this stuff. Um, and so that's what I did. And dozens and dozens and dozens of sighting reports later, like here I am. I wrote
Uh-huh.
the Lake Michigan Mothman book about halfway through 2019. So about 2.5 years into receiving those reports. And at that time, because we live in the internet age, I saw that there was what I felt to be this real need for somebody to get all of this together in a format that would spell out sort of really just very clearly to people what had gone into this and help them separate fact from misinformation, because there was a lot of it. People
Sure.
share these stories online. They don't care what's real or what's not real. It's
Hmm.
all entertainment, which it's is fine. I'm not going to judge anybody, but it doesn't make my life any
Right.
easier. And
Right.
and so I wanted to get this together as sort of a reference work, and hopefully make it fun to read too, because I like to be accessible. I think it's important to
Sure.
be accessible, especially when you're writing about weird stuff. Like it has to be fun to read, or normal people aren't going to want to read it. So,
Right.
which I
Right.
get. But yeah, so I wanted to get that out, and I did. And the one thing that nobody ever tells you, like John Keel certainly never told anybody this when he wrote the Mothman prophecies, is that there's no real ending to any of this. Like it never actually ends. Like there's
Uh-huh.
no momentous event. Like there's no climax to this story. It
Sure.
just goes on forever and ever and ever, and people just periodically send you sighting reports.
Right.
And so that is what has happened. Like it's
Sure.
not like the Lake Michigan Mothman book is going to tell you everything you need to know if you're really interested in these sightings. It's just a really good place to start because I
Right.
keep getting these sightings, and I put some of them into my next book, Strange Tales of the Impossible. Some of them will be in my fourth book coming out for Llewellyn, which again I is just titled Mothman. It's the publisher
Uh-huh.
picks the title, so which is
Sure,
fine.
sure.
I no shade against Llewellyn; they're great to work with. Um,
Sure.
but
No,
yeah,
that
and I probably in further books down the line somewhere I'll have even more because people are going to keep sending them to me.
right, right. Well, it's interesting you said that about it not ending because I think the thing with Mothman, especially if anyone read the book or saw the movie, Mothman Prophecies with it was Richard Gere, I think if I remember right,
Yes, playing
that
John
starred in it.
Klein instead of John Keel. Yeah.
Oh, that's right. That's right. I don't even, I knew that, but I don't think I even realized they changed the name. But yeah, so it seemed like the bridge collapses in Point Pleasant, but I think is still the deadliest bridge collapse in U.S. history, right?
47 people died, which is
Yeah.
bonkers, obviously.
Right. And so I think a lot of people thought, oh, then Mothman, flew off to parts unknown, right? Like that was kind of the end. And I know, well, so actually, I don't let me say I know because I don't know anything. I'm very much like I'm one step beyond like a normie, like I know probably enough to be dangerous, not enough to be, an expert by any stretch. But so you said it hasn't ended. Is there still sightings like in Point Pleasant? Is there any difference between how the kind of experience reports go from that region versus the Chicago, the Lake Michigan region?
Sure. So yeah, I mean, and the sightings here started in Chicago, but they've since spread out into like southern Wisconsin and down into like southern Illinois, into Indiana. And at this point, like I've received Mothman reports from the entire continent of North America, all over
Uh-huh.
the entire world. So it doesn't seem to be restricted to any particular geographic area. I'd say the big difference is a narrative one because
Mhm.
Point Pleasant had John Keel, and the Midwest just has me. And John Keel, he was such a great writer, and he was so entertaining. Like his style was entertaining, but he definitely had I this is like it's my least popular opinion. So I'm always trying to find new ways to phrase it to somehow be less offensive, but I don't think there is a way
Sure.
to do it. So it's
Yeah.
probably better to just pull off the stupid band-aid. But yeah, he never let the truth get in the way of a good story. And
Uh-huh. Sure.
when he was writing the Mothman prophecies, what it very much seems to me is that okay, well, first of all, if the Mothman prophecies was just about Mothman sightings, like strictly Mothman sightings, it would have been like 50 pages long. It would have been like
Hmm.
a novella at best.
Right.
You could have just distributed it as a pamphlet. And so he included all of this other stuff that, like these other stories he had heard from that region. And I think he speculated a lot about connections that might have been between them because, he really was very heavily influenced by Charles Fort. And if people don't know who Charles Fort is, he was an early 20th century writer who collected weird news stories from all over the entire world, and he would compile them and try to make connections between these weird events and sort of speculate what might be behind it. He gave us the word teleportation, like he coined that
Oh,
word, did not
okay.
exist
Yeah.
before Charles Fort. Yeah, and yeah, so like he was very influential. He's kind of like the H.P. Lovecraft of the paranormal, right? Like the
Uh-huh.
most
Sure.
influential, like the single most influential person that most people have not heard of.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's Charles Fort.
Right.
And so, like, John Keel was in adherent to Fort's sort of philosophy of making these weird connections. And so he included all of this extra stuff in there that people have since sort of taken as gospel. And I'm like, I don't think you really get Keel if you read that and go, oh, this is all meant to be taken as 100% literally true in every case,
Right.
because it's demonstrably not. And I think that he was a good enough storyteller too to recognize that generally speaking, there's a reason most stories are written in three acts, right? And so when the Silver Bridge happened, and keep in mind, the Silver Bridge collapsed in what's 1967, and the Mothman prophecies didn't come out until almost 10 years later. And so, like Gray Barker had written his book about all that stuff, like before this. I mean, a lot had happened since then. And
Uh-huh.
so I think looking back on it, there's this golden opportunity in writing that book now where it's like, okay, none of this stuff ever really ends, but I want an ending for this book, and the Silver
Right.
Bridge is right there, you know?
Right.
And
So you had the
so,
ultimate tragedy just right there to conclude things. So yeah. Yeah, I
right,
get it completely. I think that's it's interesting you said that because one of the things that I've said on here, and it's not popular when I say it to the kind of serious Sasquatch researchers, is like, I don't actually want it to be solved, right? Like, I don't like want them to find an ape and they're like, oh, now we have this ape, and I feel like it's a little weirder than that, anyways. But I'm like, even if it is just an ape that we haven't discovered, I kind of like it to be a legend. Like, I don't want someone to shoot one just so we can prove it. That seems very like selfish of us. Like, us humans need to know about it or else it doesn't matter. Like, who cares about us if we
right.
know or not? Like, let it be. But having that as from the story perspective, like even like oral storytelling, right? Where you like, yeah, you have the wood boogers or whatever, you probably do mythologize it a little bit to set a greater point or something to the kids or just to make a better story that people are going to remember. So I think that's an interesting way. Is there anything with Mothman that's kind of like the not safe for work or like the taboo? Like, I know with like Sasquatch, like people will say, oh, they saw lights or they saw it kind of do like a spider crawl or that like these weird, completely not ape or associated with UFOs or things. And I know Mothman did have, I think, some association even with Keel with UFOs and things in the region. But is there anything
Right.
like that with Mothman that maybe like it gets people say it, but it's one of those things people don't like to talk about, or it doesn't usually get printed, or referenced?
Pretty much everything I just said about Keel. I mean, if I'm being perfectly honest, um,
Sure.
it's true. One of the things that I think we have to realize in this field is that the vast majority of people just want to be entertained by these stories. Like the people that I would consider myself as helping are a small minority.
Sure.
And most people just want to be entertained. They don't care if it's true as long as it's a cool story. And so if you splash a bunch of cold water on them by telling them, well, a lot of this probably isn't real in the way that you might hope it's real,
Right.
it's not very popular, frankly.
Uh-huh.
And or it isn't necessarily popular. It's certainly not popular with the sort of entrenched authorities or self-declared authorities that want ownership of these stories, which
Right.
seems silly, but they do exist.
Sure.
And so like there are people with a real stake in this mythology, and if you upset the apple cart, right, then they don't like it,
Mm-hmm.
and so they don't always react super well. But one thing that I had to learn very early in my career was that I can't just go full nerd on people all the time and be like, no, let me sit down and explain to you for 2.5 hours like
Right.
everything that isn't true that was printed in the Mothman prophecies. Like nobody wants to hear that. So you
Right.
have to you have to work it in a way that's still entertaining. You have to be able to still, like, you have to be able to spin a good yarn, even if the purpose of that yarn is to unspin other yarns. Like
Sure. Yeah.
it is a skill that you have to develop if you care about whether or not something is real or not. And I very much do.
Right. Right.
So, that's that. I think that's honestly it, because when it comes to like taboo subjects with Mothman that exist within sort of the realm of the paranormal, nothing is off limits. Like that is the vein that Keel tapped, is
Hmm.
basically saying that every single weird thing anywhere is all connected, and it's connected in this way that is all around us all the time, and Mothman's a part of it, and UFOs are a part of it, and like contactees are a part of it, and you can be a part of it too. All you got to do is believe, and
Uh-huh.
that's
Sure.
attractive. I get it. I
Yeah.
very much do, but it's also probably not real. So we should, in my opinion, it's more valuable to concentrate on the real. And there's lots of weird stuff that I think has a higher likelihood of being real, that
Uh-huh.
is still plenty interesting. And I think the entertaining way to go about that is to speculate openly instead of, sort of couching it as this reliable narration when it is not. And just, say to people, hey, look, what I do know is that people experience things they can't explain relatively frequently. And that is fascinating. And it could mean a number of things, one of which maybe could be ultra terrestrials, or some other aspect of Keel's philosophy. But it could also be this other stuff. So we should talk about that a little bit too, just
Right.
in
Right.
case.
Yeah, how, as a writer, how do you handle that? So you have the H.P. Lovecraft, like you had said, right? So you have Keel that has kind of set the stage, and when people think Mothman, right, that's kind of the backdrop, right? It's like if you write fantasy now, they're going to compare you to Tolkien, right? Like that's kind of the giant, behemoth of it. Um, and so how do you go about then when you want to write it? Like you had said, you want to unspin, the yarns he had made that were maybe just kind of to tell a good story and tell something a little more closer to the fact. How do you go about creating that identity for yourself while, knowing people have all this background, Mothman from John Keel? How do you then go about, writing it in a way that, like you said, is still entertaining and things?
Sure. Well, I think that the most important tool that I have in my arsenal when trying to do that are the witnesses themselves. I very much prefer to allow people to tell their own stories as much as possible. So I like to use a lot of direct quotes. Like I'm
Hmm.
happy to, well, when I'm interviewing somebody, maybe to I would never put words in somebody's mouth, and I never ask any leading questions. But what I will do afterwards is I'll transcribe everything, and of course I'll pick out the parts that I think form the core narrative that they're trying to provide surrounding their experience, and put that together in a way that I think is easier and probably more entertaining to read than just like, literally transcribing uh,
Sure.
120 minutes of stream of consciousness and expecting anybody in the world to want to read that. Like nobody's going to
Uh-huh.
want to. But I think that is the best way that I've found to sort of get these ideas across, is by talking, very sort of strictly about people's experiences and saying, look, this is what we know is people are saying that they're experiencing this. And we're not going to ignore outliers. We're not going to ignore anything that is inconvenient to anybody's narrative. We're just going to put it out there and say, this is what people are saying. This is what I was able to dig up about it when I was investigating it. Um, and here it all is. And then using that as sort of our data set, go, okay, then what can we learn from this, right? And then
Hmm.
and then that's
Sure.
where you can get into sort of the speculative parts. And you never want to, because I don't know that Keel was wrong. I'm not saying that, right? I just don't know that he was right, you know?
Right. Sure.
So,
Sure.
like, you have to include that stuff, but then you also have to
Right.
include everything else that it could be too. And I think if you let the witnesses speak for themselves first, like that draws people in because that's interesting. That's fascinating, right? Like that,
Mm-hmm.
like human experience, I think in storytelling is so compelling to people. I mean, it's why we love documentaries, right? It's why
Sure.
people are interested in true crime and all of this other stuff. Is because
Uh-huh.
fundamentally these are human experiences, and even if it hasn't happened to you, you can relate because you are also human.
Right.
And and yeah, so like using that to draw people in then allows you to keep their attention because they're interested then. They're like, okay, well, what is this? What could this be?
Right.
And then you
Mm-hmm.
can go, okay, and then you can say, okay, well, let's talk about that. What could it be?
Sure, sure. That makes perfect sense. I think there's a really wonderful YouTube channel called the Y Files. I don't know if you've ever checked
Mhm.
it out, but he does that. He has, he gives you just the story and he does fairly nice production. He does a nice job, telling it and things. And then he'll go, but is it true? And then go and sometimes he's like, I thought I was going to debunk this. Like he doesn't like cryptids and he did one on Bigfoot and he was like, I thought I was going to debunk the whole thing and it was all going to be silly, but there's a lot of weird stuff, a lot of stuff that doesn't make sense. And then sometimes though, he just debunks the whole thing. He's like, no, this didn't really happen. This is,
Sure.
there's records otherwise. So I think that's a fun way to do it. What do you think? So are you in the camp that, is Mothman is mostly like, I know there's like the crane theory, and I'm sure it's probably there's probably lots of misidentifications, right? And so sometimes
Mhm.
people maybe saw some crane at night or whatever, right? Do you think it's mostly misidentifications? Do you think it is something, stranger than that or?
Sure. So, I did a count a while ago to compare the number of reports we had received just from the Midwest and see how many I thought were probably misidentifications and how many couldn't be or were unlikely to be, assuming that the witness was authentically relating their experience. I think I ended up with maybe roughly 40% possibly, being those misidentifications. When I first started investigating these sightings for a while, probably at least going on a year, I struggled because there seemed to be two different like sighting profiles, right? On the one hand, we would get the sightings that were usually during the day of something flying really far away, and there was none of the paranormal aspects I think that people have come to expect with Mothman sightings. And and so they didn't seem particularly strange to me. People would try to describe what they were seeing in those sightings as say like a giant bat or like a giant bird like too big to be normal or even like a man in a wingsuit or something. But otherwise, like there was nothing to lead you to believe that there's anything all that unusual going on here. And then we had the second profile of sightings, which were usually at night, were usually relatively close. That is to say that like the witness was in relatively close proximity to this thing. They would usually see it on the ground, at least to start. And they would always describe these weird paranormal aspects. You would have like glowing red eyes. So not glowing in the way that like eye shine makes eyes appear to glow, but glowing with some sort of like inner luminosity. And you would have people describing this feeling of extreme fear or maybe of being hypnotized. They might have other paranormal experiences that they've had around the same time. Sometimes they'll have like weird haunting phenomena that will happen like afterwards for some period of time. And so like those are really, really weird. And that couldn't be a bird, or at least it's very, very unlikely to be a bird
Right.
if what they're saying is credible. And in speaking to these people, like it certainly seemed as though at a minimum they believed what they were telling me. And so
Uh-huh.
about a year into the investigation, it would have been May of 2018. I came across this report from a gentleman in the Pilsen neighborhood of Chicago, and he wanted to report his sighting of, well, what he described to me as either like a giant bat or like a person in a wingsuit. And so he was bicycling to work one day, like middle of the day, I think it was the afternoon or something. And he sees this couple on the street corner, and they're pointing at something, looking at something up in the sky, and so naturally curious, like he wants to see what they're checking out, and he sees this winged creature sort of flying around above Chicago.
Uh-huh.
And luckily, because he's on his bicycle, he's wearing a helmet and he
Uh-huh.
has a GoPro camera on his helmet. And so
Hmm.
he very helpfully decides that he's going to follow this thing around, get as much footage of it as he can, so he can send it to a Mothman investigator or something, I guess. And he
Sure.
did. Like he sent me the SD card that it was on and everything. And with his help, I was able to isolate some stills and blow them up, and we got a pretty good idea, like a good look at this thing. And it was a bird. It was a
Uh-huh.
100% a bird, like undeniably a bird, like based on the estimated size and impact on the witness and its silhouette. I think it could have been something like a great blue heron, and they're big
Uh-huh.
birds, and they
Sure.
migrate through Chicago. The reality is with climate change and sort of the destruction rather of their natural habitat, all kinds of heron species, all kinds of migratory bird species. You can think of, speaking of cranes, same deal,
Uh,
is they're roosting in urban areas more, first of all, but also they're like coming north earlier, they're staying north longer, even overwintering sometimes, which is super weird. And
uh-huh.
so
Sure.
I think part of it, at least like part of what could explain, this first profile of sighting is people seeing these birds that they're not usually used to seeing. It's not that they weren't around, it's just that like people weren't seeing them that often. And when you've got a city of what, like 3 million people or something, to get like 15 or 20 or even 50 of them, like to see a great blue heron and think it's something weird, that's not a huge percentage of the population, right? Like that's a very
Right.
tiny percentage. And so
Hmm.
like that sounds about right for me in terms of misidentifications.
Sure.
So, like when as soon as I got that, all of a sudden I was like, wow, like this makes so much sense. This entire first profile of sightings, which I kind of suspected was probably something like misidentifications of large bird species. Now I have evidence. Like this is proof. Like now when I get those sightings, I can go, oh, okay, well that was probably a bird,
Uh-huh.
presumably,
Sure.
because they're very consistent. Like people, they use the same language, they describe the same situation over and over again, and it's almost uncanny how like on point like this guy's sighting was when it came to all of these other sightings that were so
Uh-huh.
similar. Like they were just almost identical. But that still leaves us with over half of them that are super weird and thus
Right.
like unlikely to be misidentifications. But like I wouldn't be doing my job if I ignored that, right? Like it can't all
Right.
be Mothman.
Right. Yeah, sure, sure. Well, it's like when I had Dr. Jeff Meldrum on, he was like, only one Bigfoot sighting has to be real. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
there's a real phenomenon there. There's a real creature. So it's when you actually think about it, you're like, yeah, you can throw out. And had Michael Mays, another Sasquatch researcher, and he said the same thing about misidentification with bears. He's like, you can almost, I can tell you when they're gonna do it, and then you're kind of just asking some questions, and you go, so how was the nose? And they'll go, the nose was pointy, it's almost like a snout, and he was like. Yeah, so those are the people that saw a bear, and especially areas that don't have bears. Well, like I guess the part of Texas where he is, the black bears were starting to come back down, and as they start getting more Sasquatch reports, then he goes, and when you see it at
Yep.
night and you're not used to seeing it, and they stand up to get a berry or whatever they're doing, because bears stand up for various reasons, then yeah,
Sure.
it,
Just to
it
sniff
looks
the
really
air.
weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So I can see that completely. So, and I always like it when, because I don't like there's the phenomenon with like ghost shows. And it's every single
Mm.
time they go to a place, they always get some evidence of a haunting and have this equipment you never really know. Like, and they're like, it's telling you there's a ghost there. I'm like, I don't know, it's a beeping light. You would have to kind of prove the science here, for me.
Right.
And I know some of those get popular, but I never liked those ones because then I'm like, well, there's all the noise and there's the signal, right? Like, what are those, that 40% that might be something real that's really interesting, So if we don't ever filter out the ones that are misidentifications, or I'm sure, I think it's actually a small percent, but I'm sure there's some hoaxers, some people that just tell a story.
Yeah.
You know, positive, but if you can start to kind of filter those ones out and get to the ones where, oh no, this is like, I'm sure if there's a birder out there, because I get really fascinated with raptors for a while. So hawks and eagles, and I mean, we would be on the freeway going 70. I'd look over, and from a spot, I could tell you, oh, that was a red-tailed hawk right there, and and my family got so annoyed with me with it, and it was, you could just, the gist of them, you could just see it and kind of know, and then I would stop and have to look at them, for a while. But so if a birder saw it, I'm sure they would look up and go, oh, that was a heron. Oh, that's cool. I
Right.
can mark that off on my list or whatever, right? But
Yeah.
if they're the ones going, hey, no, this thing was in the tree and it looked, then you're like, oh no, that they're gonna know what was in the tree. Their mind immediately is gonna go to what bird it is, not to Mothman or something. So
Clickety clack, clickety clack, clickety clack. Ding. Oh, hello. You caught me right as I was putting the finishing touches on my epic absurdist satire, Pirates of Appalachia. And now it is time for the long road to publication and the long editing process. As writers, we spend tons of time editing our work. The hardest part, I think, of the editing process was really like the proofreading, the copy editing, because you were so immersed in it. I've just spent 13 years immersed in Pirates, got it all together, went through, edited it front and back by characters, all these different asymmetrical ways. And still, it's going to have typos in it. And they're going to horrify me one day if I ever find those in the actual printed edition. The way I combat that is with Edit GPT. You found today's sponsor. The link is on the screen now. I'm going to put it here. Here's the link. If you're on the podcast forum and you can't see me pointing up at that link, if you're on a podcast, you're really missing out. I'm really animated with my hands. But if you can't find it on there, feel free. You'll find it in the description. It helps support the show, helps restock the bar, helps keep this guy happy so that we can keep putting all these shows out there for all of you. Thanks for everything. Let's get back to the writing, because Pirates of Appalachia is not going to finish itself. The one thing Edit GPT cannot do is save the file for you. So I'm going to make sure to save that now. So I want to get back to my work. You get back to your regularly scheduled programming.
rapid fire questions. I like to call it shots because, again, I'm very theme oriented. And I like to start all of these now with trivia because I'm going to have a leaderboard for everyone. But the problem is with all of the trivia is that rather than giving you trivia on stuff I take things that I know that and then invert them into something that you probably have no idea about it. So
Great.
being that, exactly. And the points are completely made up. So I went to the Keel game school theory of just have fun and make a good story of it. So being that
Sure.
moths are nocturnal butterflies, I thought I'd ask you about diurnal butterflies, or just butterflies, as one would say. So all
Okay.
butterfly facts. So are you ready?
Yes. Okay. Let's go.
All right. So the monarch butterfly makes one of the most remarkable migrations in all the animal kingdom. How far do they travel?
Oh boy. Are you looking for like a distance in miles? Because
Yeah, you could
it's
say
for like,
distance in miles, or you could give me the terrain, that they
okay,
cover.
because they go from at least as far north as us all the way down to Mexico, I believe. So pretty much the entirety of North America.
You are
And
correct. Yeah, they start in
I don't mean
Canada
to
and all the way
cheat,
down.
but my wife is really into citizen science and she raises monarch butterflies. You can't make this stuff up.
Very good, very good. So you'll be very good probably the first two. I think the first two here are about the monarch. But yeah, so it's about 3,000 miles total. Bonus points on this is what's the percentage of the monarch population that actually makes the migration?
Oh boy, I bet it's low. I'm going to say 20%.
20%. Okay, a little high. It's actually 1%.
Wow, that's
Yeah, it was
okay.
just
Yikes.
1%. And no single butterfly completes the entire trip. It's actually 3 or 4
Right.
generations that do it. So are just nonsense. I don't know how like that how like it's like the great grandkids are the ones that make it back, and you're like, how would they have any idea? Like I don't know. I guess it's
They're really
wagon
motivated.
train.
Like, just think about the generations of stories behind this journey at that point, you know?
I
Of course,
know,
they're
I know.
invested. Of course they're going
They
to make
are.
it.
Right, right. Yeah, it's pretty wild. It's actually not too far from me here. They have a big spawning area in about the Pismo Beach, kind of Central Coast, California. And you can go, and a
Nice.
friend of mine always told me I need to take the kids. One day, my kids are all getting older now. I'll take them now that they're older and they won't completely appreciate it. But
Of course.
so why do butterflies stagger and sway as they fly? And a little hint on this because I worded it a little weird. Some butterflies are known to engage in a behavior that would make them suitable guests for this show.
Um, okay, so like have somehow they like drank fermented sugar water or something and they're drunk? I don't.
You're so close. Fermented fruit. Yeah, I will give you
Oh,
credit for
okay.
it. They like
Sure.
fermented fruit, especially like rotting mangoes and bananas. And then they
That
say
that
the
makes
male
sense.
butterflies actually scoop up alcoholic treats because they produce pheromones that attract the females to them. So there's a
Nice.
weird, have you ever heard of the drunken monkey theory?
No, like not
So
specifically.
there's a theory because monkeys do that too. Monkeys like to go get
Huh.
the fermented fruit and get drunk off of them. And there's a theory that because we're like evolution, that our drinking habits today go all the way back to the drunk monkeys, eons ago or whatever. But I thought
Sure.
when I saw that the butterflies also, exhibit the same behavior. So,
Nice.
in ancient Greek mythology, what did butterflies represent?
Ooh, in ancient Greek mythology, death?
Well, so no, almost. So they represent the human soul, then also
Oh,
metamorphosis
okay.
because they're the cocoon, going out. So actually, the
Gotcha.
Greek word for butterfly is psyche. It means soul or mind, and that's where we get a
Okay.
lot of. So what was it? It's like all psychology, psychiatry is literally the study of the butterfly soul, kind of within us all.
Gotcha. Like I was thinking of them as like a sort of psychopomp.
Oh,
So,
sure,
okay.
sure. Yeah, yeah.
Close.
I get.
Pretty okay. Pretty close, but not technically correct. So,
We'll give you half points for that one. We'll give you
thanks.
5 points. We just throw them out there. What does the term butterfly effect refer to?
Oh, butterfly effect is from chaos theory, right? Where seemingly unrelated events can influence each other. So, like if a butterfly flaps its wings, could disrupt some air current that could cause a hurricane.
Yeah, very good, very good. You nailed it. And it was actually what was Edward Lorenz that he was a mathematician and meteorologist that originally came up
All
with.
right.
And then let's see if I've lost my space. Okay, our bonus question here. What is my favorite butterfly? And acceptable to name just the colors as well. Hence, there is maybe sports
Hmm.
field. Oh, actually, maybe blocked by Mothman behind me. But if you saw any of the stuff I sent you, the color pattern, even the color pattern I'm wearing now,
Hmm. Favorite
hence
butterfly?
the brief
Is
word.
it what's that?
I was gonna say you could just say the colors. I don't expect you just to know
Oh,
the name.
sure. Well, I'll take a stab at it. Is it like a swallowtail butterfly?
It's not. It's not. There's
No.
a
Okay. Darn. What is it?
there's a black and gold butterfly called the golden birdwing. Has big
Oh,
black
okay.
front wings and then yellow background. I'm a big Steeler fan. Mothman's covering up my Steeler sign
Sure.
behind me,
No,
but
I saw black and yellow, and I was trying to think. I was desperately like trying to think of a black and yellow butterfly. And I think some swallowtail butterflies might
they
be.
might
You
be.
know who
They
would have
might
got
be.
that question? My wife would have nailed it because I'm sure she would have known right away. She'd be like, well, maybe a swallowtail, but you know what, like what a cooler version of that would be, and that she
Right.
probably just would have guessed the
Right.
exact one
Okay.
somehow.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna give you points for that one too. I'm gonna say if it was black and gold, that's good enough. Awesome. So that's it for the trivia portion here. So just rapid fire questions. So what's your favorite holiday tradition? Any holiday you
Oh,
want,
favorite.
take it wherever you go.
Okay, burning a Yule log.
Oh, very good. Very
Yeah.
good. Did that factor in at all to the, because we skipped the high strangeness for the Yule, but the burning Yule log, did that have any correlations?
Yeah, well, absolutely. Everybody expects my favorite holiday to be Halloween, and it's not. Like, it's Christmas. It's always been
Uh-huh.
Christmas. And that's because Christmas, well, okay, I don't want to go on a huge digression, but believe me when I say I absolutely could. People
Uh-huh.
have this tendency to conflate like ancient Gaelic and Germanic beliefs, like there's this sort of like neo-pagan conflation happening with those.
Sure.
And so like, Germanic tribes didn't have Halloween. They had Yule. And Yule was the
Uh-huh.
time when all the monsters came out and the dead came back to visit you. And then
Sure.
like also it was the darkest time of the year, so we should light a bunch of fires and try to make the best of it and just have a nice
Uh-huh.
time,
Right.
also.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so yeah, like Yule, I mean, it's or Christmas time now, of course,
Sure.
I mean, it's very dark and it's very, very weird.
Right.
And it's so much weirder than Halloween. And that's
Uh-huh.
why I wanted to write that book. So I was like,
Sure.
Christmas is the best, like it's everything I like. It's fantasy and horror.
Right.
It's not
Sure.
just
Yeah.
horror, right?
Right.
Like it's got both, and that's great to
Uh-huh.
me.
Right. Yeah, no, that's a great point. Well, so we can talk after, email after, but maybe we can have you on again and we'll just do a special Christmas one and we'll talk all the Yule stuff. That would be super fun.
Sure.
What's the biggest risk you've ever taken?
Ooh, biggest risk. I don't Probably going back to school, honestly. I went back to school at like 27 and I wanted
Okay.
to because I wanted to get my English degree. I wanted to be a writer.
Uh-huh.
And that's a huge risk because you have no idea if writing is ever going to pay off, like ever.
Sure, sure.
So, yeah, like
Okay.
that was a big one. Yeah.
Very, very good. Very, very good. Thank you for that. What's the biggest failure you've ever had?
Ooh, biggest failure. Hmm. Every relationship I ever had before my wife, probably. They're just all tied for first.
Sure, sure, sure. I'll equal, but that led you to where you are. You always learn from failures.
That's
So
right.
you got it right this time. Very
I just kept
good.
failing up until I met my wife.
That's very good. Yeah, the corporate career there, you just keep failing up, or
Yes.
the politician career. I think it's also the way that goes nowadays. If you were to give yourself a lifetime achievement award, what would it be for?
Oh boy. Lifetime Achievement Award. I don't know. Maybe, hmm. Lifetime Achievement Award for repetitive viewings of Night of the Demons, maybe? I've seen that movie a lot. And sometimes
Okay,
I feel
yeah.
like I'm the only one keeping it alive.
Right,
So
right.
maybe that.
That's true. I always joke with my wife because there's certain restaurants. I love mom and pop places. So there's certain ones we go
Sure.
to and I love them and they always inevitably close. And I'm like, if I really love it, I'm like, no, I need to make sure I go every week because I might be the thing. Like me not going for a few weeks might be where it drops off
That's
the
right.
ledge. So you got to keep it going. Mothman versus Sasquatch, steel cage match. Who you got?
Oh, if it's a steel cage, Sasquatch
Hmm.
is going to rock Mothman. Like
Yeah.
Mothman can't get away. Sasquatch is going to just pick him up by like his skinny legs and just wail on him.
Just well, right. What about no cage where Mothman can use his aerobatics? Does he have a shot
I
then?
then maybe then probably Mothman. Like if he can
Yeah.
stick and move,
Right.
he's probably got weird magic powers or something. Like
Sure. Sure. Very good.
you
Yeah.
never
Well, we'll see
know.
if they can make that happen for us one day. Um, and then what is the strangest, potentially self-incriminating thing you've Googled this week?
Ooh, I mean, there could be a lot in there. Oh boy, I just saw like the sentencing for the like that monster in Idaho. Like that just happened.
Oh, right. Right.
And
Yeah.
right. And so like I was Googling things related to like that case because I always wonder, about stuff like that. And so yeah, I mean like so I was like, well, how like, why would you have to go to Walmart and ask about a ski mask? Like, it's easy to find a ski mask. Like, it's got to be. So I'm like, I wonder if I just Google it right now, and
Uh-huh.
it's the middle of summer, but like, let's Google it right now. How easy would it be? It's super easy, by the way. You can get a ski mask anytime. And you can
Sure.
just have it
Yeah.
delivered to your house. Like it's not an
Right.
issue. You don't go have to ask somebody at Walmart. But yeah, so probably stuff related to that.
Yeah, yeah, sure. I think
It would
killers
be very
always go
suspicious.
to like Walmart or like Home Depot or something. Like me and my wife were joking about that 'cause she
Right.
loves true crime and will listen to it. And they always like kill someone and then go to Home Depot and buy a shovel like the same day, And you're like, so actually,
Right.
our shovel broke and I had to go get one. And I had told my wife, you can't die for a few weeks because I just had to buy a shovel. So stay alive now for 2 to 3 weeks at least, so I don't
Right.
get implicated.
Yeah, I put it on the credit card. It's very traceable. Like, let's just all let's save ourselves a headache and just don't.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, just don't die on me. And then our AI question for the night. I always like the AI overlords to ask one question, so I punch in the guest name. Yuletide Guide to High Strangeness connects holiday traditions with the paranormal. What surprised you most about the intersection of folklore, seasonal celebrations, and unexplained phenomena? And do you find that certain times of year tend to produce clusters of strange experiences? You can answer any part of that. AI is always extremely
Sure.
wordy with their questions, but
Oh yeah, no, totally. Well, I mean, honestly, the impetus behind writing the book was because I was surprised. Like once, I became a writer and I really started researching things like folklore. I was surprised at how closely so much of that folklore mirrored paranormal experiences that people are still reporting today. Everything from
uh-huh,
UFO sightings to alien abduction to ghosts and hauntings to Sasquatch sightings. Like they're represented in these Christmas stories, which is
sure.
bizarre to me. And so like that was the most surprising thing, I think, just in general, was to discover that. And do I think any particular time of year has any specific relevance? Not really. I think that like the reason that those stories became associated with that time of year is because that was a time of year that everybody was stuck inside telling stories, frankly.
Uh-huh,
And so it
sure.
was just
Makes sense.
it was a good time for it.
Uh-huh, right, right. Well, and it's so dark too, right? I mean, you
Yeah.
feel like there's more ghosts and more things lurking in the woods when it's, dark at 4 in the afternoon as it is around here.
Right. Yeah.
So, and then final question for our shots portion here. Favorite podcast and why is it Writers Drinking Whiskey?
Well, because this is the one that had me on, of course. So naturally, something that most people don't expect to learn about me probably is that most of the podcasts I listen to are about tabletop role-playing games. They have nothing to do
Uh-huh.
with any of this. So I'll
Sure,
listen to
sure.
like Glitter Boys is one of my favorite. Probably nobody has heard of this podcast, but I love it because it talks about Palladium, like the specific company in the tabletop role-playing game space and their
Uh-huh.
games, which aren't
Right.
even like super popular games anymore. So it's like
Uh-huh.
the fringe of the fringe. But like that's mostly what I
Right.
listen to, like my very specific nerd interests.
Right, very good, very good. Thanks. But yeah, I always I like to ask the question because it's self-congratulatory and facetious, but also like hearing about the other podcasts, what people are listening to and stuff. So that's fun to
Of
learn. So
course.
awesome. Thanks so much for that. So yeah, so if you want to read for us, a little bit from the
Oh,
Mothman
sure.
book, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, I thought I would just read the introduction. All right, here
Okay.
we go. Mid-century America was full of monsters, and among them, none have persevered like Mothman. To exist alongside such oddities as the Loveland Frogman, Flatwoods Monster, and Kelly Hopkinsville Goblins, and make it out of the 20th century as one of Forteana's most recognizable monsters is no mean feat. It takes something special, something weird, but it also takes a little help. There's a running joke among Forteans that John Keel's The Mothman Prophecies would barely be considered a pamphlet, let alone a book, if all it contained were actual reports of the Mothman. It's everything else included by Keel in the work that makes it so captivating. That's the allure of the Mothman, not necessarily what it is, but what it represents, and what that empowers us to imagine as possible. Keel wove a tale of beleaguered investigators harassed by entities beyond the ken of humanity, embattled townsfolk in fear of monsters, and a small town adrift amidst a sea of high strangeness. He combined UFO sightings and even their purported occupants, other strange creature sightings, psychic and parapsychological phenomena, and assorted folklore with his own ultra-terrestrial hypothesis, which asserts that many unexplained phenomena represent an ancient hidden race of beings with whom we have shared our planet for millennia, into a fantastical narrative, one so immersive and engaging that it has left readers enchanted for decades since. And yet, the story remains relatable. Perhaps most importantly, Mothman takes the impossible and grounds it in the everyday. The witnesses to this phenomenon could be anyone. They could work in your office, go to your church, attend your school, or pass you on the street and you wouldn't look twice. These witnesses are noteworthy because they are us. An encounter with Mothman could happen to anyone and often occurs when we least expect it. This phenomenon is far from over, and Mothman sightings continue across the country into the present day. From coast to coast and throughout the Great Lakes, winged humanoid sightings are reported by everyday people just trying to live their lives. These encounters aren't sought out. They come as we go about our business. Imagine running errands only to find yourself fully immersed in the high strangeness of a winged humanoid encounter through no fault of your own. You've seen something that has shaken you to your core, fully unexpected but no less impactful for it, and now your mind is reeling with no idea how to proceed. You want to share this experience with someone. We're social animals, after all, and the catharsis of sharing our experiences cannot be understated. But you're afraid. What if you're mocked? Could you lose friends? What about your job? Steeling yourself, you approach a loved one and bare your soul. You desperately want, no need, to be taken seriously by this person you would otherwise trust with anything, but instead, you're laughed at. Maybe they don't exactly ostracize you, but their flippant attitude displayed in the face of your vulnerability hurts all the same. If you can't share your experience with this person, then you can't share it with anyone. So you shut up about it. You keep this experience, this powerful, maybe even traumatic experience, to yourself, and you don't talk about it until one day you read an article or hear a story or see a television show about someone who has had a similar experience, something you never imagined possible. You thought you were all alone. Mothman is somewhat known among weirdos, although still nowhere near the level of ghosts or Bigfoot, but you're not a weirdo. You'd never heard of it. You never imagined that anyone had ever seen something similar. But here you are, learning that someone has. And just as importantly, learning that there are people out there who will take you seriously. So you reach out to one of the investigators involved in whatever case you found, and you speak to them. And finally, you achieve catharsis. After who knows how many weeks or months or years, you're able to dump the psychic load you've been carrying on someone actually prepared to hear it. You feel better, and your experience is added to the canon of events to help understand what exactly is going on. That's why this is important, and it's why we do what we do. If you're reading this, we place you firmly within our camp, the investigators, the researchers, people who have either experienced the impossible for themselves or are at least curious and caring enough to explore these possibilities in the name of humanity. Welcome. Join us. We're about to recount our journey into the unknown.
Very good. Thanks so much for that. And thanks so much for coming on. It was a pleasure and a blast getting to chat with you and get to know you a little bit here. So as I like to say, it's last call. You don't have to go, but you'll have to restart the video. And what I like to ask is, there's a lot of people, like kind of everyone knows like UFOs or UAPs, right? The artists formerly known as UFOs, Bigfoot, ghosts, things of that. Is there any phenomenon that we're not talking about that we should be? Is there anything that's kind of in that high strangeness area that, or maybe not even high strangeness, however you would put it?
Just any phenomenon that I think goes ignored. Um, I would say that I think that there are things that receive a disproportionate amount of attention. Like, I wish people cared way less about, say, government disclosure and way more about individuals' UFO sightings. So,
Sure.
to put it as broadly as possible, yeah, I think that we need to start caring more about the experiences of actual individuals and what that means, and less about reality television and government disclosure that frankly is never going to come.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I think it's a great point, actually. I always think it's funny with UFOs because UFOs, people used to look at you weirder for believing in the aliens, the green aliens coming than the Sasquatch, right? But then
Right.
once the government was like, oh, we have these sightings, I'm like, well, yeah, well, maybe there is. It's like, I don't know if any time in my life that people distrusted the government more, but then the government throws you a bone and goes, well, the UFOs, and they're like, oh, well, there must be something to it. And I'm like, well, you distrust them for everything
Exactly.
else. Maybe here we should also distrust them, maybe more over here, because who knows, what's
That's
happening.
exactly right, actually. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks again so much, for coming on.
Well,
This
thank
really
you.
was a pleasure. I always geek out for it. My wife knows. She's like, "Oh, you're doing your show about Mothman and stuff today," and I'm like, "Yeah." So I've been giggling all morning, so this was a real pleasure.
That's great. Thank you so much. I had a great time. I'd be happy to come back whenever.
Extra shot. Thanks so much for tuning in. It was a real blast getting to know Tobias and hearing about his research and his life and his own experiences. If you want to learn more, I will have his website linked up in the description and in the pinned comment if you're watching on YouTube. Otherwise, it'll be in the description for YouTube and for all the podcast audience. And of course, feel free to check us out over on Substack. If you join the list over there, you get a free ebook. I have a free audiobook actually up of my award-winning American Fiction Award-winning and best book of one of the best books of 2020, according to Kirkus review of my anthology Without Expiration. So if you check that out, we're this week, chapter 20 of Pirates of Appalachia, Mother Out of Time. We're back with the Zeodarm, and we have a meeting between Red Mother and the Atlananaki, and we're going to learn more about how they see the drone strikes coming from the Drone Strike arcade and how they're dealing with it. And then the real trouble that's happening in Zeodarm, the civil wars, the things that are the long-standing hatreds, taboos, everything else kind of coming to a head as they try to battle this kind of otherworldly presence. If they had a different mythology, maybe they would think of them as UFOs coming down and attacking, a UFO invasion. Instead, they see them as the gods coming down and invading, and now they need to uprise against them. So we get more into that. And of course, you get all these shows there. So, check it out at your leisure. If not, hang out here. There's a video that's going to pop on that they're going to think you should watch. The AI overlords and be like, watch this video next. And you should watch it next, or go to Substack, or, do whatever you want, because it's a free world. So enjoy, and cheers, everybody.